Hello, I'm Esther Giduyuat. Welcome to Africa 54. Here's what's coming up. From learning how to vote to soliciting support door to door, many American Gen Z voters are excited to cast their ballots in this year's presidential election. And in our health report, Zambia leads Sub-Saharan Africa by launching the use of an injectable HIV prevention drug. All this and much more coming up on today's Africa 54. The youngest voters participating in the U.S. presidential election are called Generation Z or Gen Z. They range in age from roughly 18 to 27 years old. From learning how to vote to soliciting support door to door, many are embracing the civic process of voting. VOA's Laura Bowman has our story.
Thank you. Our first mock voter. Yay!
Student leaders at Montgomery College in Rockville, Maryland, recently set up a mock polling booth with sample ballots and invited election officials to conduct voter education. It's an effort to get students ready to vote in the November U.S. presidential election.
Today's event was all about voter education and letting people see the polls, see what they were going to experience at the polls.
Participants like Akyan Demang seem appreciative.
I just want to see how it feels like voting for the first time, because this is my first time voting for the actual presidential election. I want to see what is the procedure.
These young voters care about a range of issues.
Financial issues with the debt of the country. I don't really understand much of it, but if I look at it, it looks like a big number. I don't understand why it's that high.
So I would say climate change is important, reproductive rights.
I think for many people, America's role in the world is a very important issue, particularly for young voters.
In the U.S. presidential race between Republican Donald Trump and Democrat Kamala Harris, most of the students we interviewed would not reveal who they'll be voting for. But the U.S. state of Maryland, a stronghold for Democrats, is expected to go for Harris. So we asked the head of the Georgia Young Republicans, Jacqueline Harn, what issues matter to her Republican peers. For many, she said, it's about the economy.
Between housing, between inflation with grocery prices and gas prices ever increasing, it's unaffordable to live and have a family right now.
And how should campaigns go about reaching young voters?
You're not going to reach a Gen Z voter by doing a phone bank and phone calling them because they probably have a spam blocker on their phone, or they're just not going to answer a number they don't know. Because we're the social media generation. Everything that we looked at is on social media. We did our news from social media.
Democratic social media influencer Harry Sisson agrees.
And I'd say primarily, maybe the main news app for young people is probably TikTok. That's my main platform. And whatever reason that may be, I think it's mostly because it's digestible. A lot of these news segments that you see on TikTok are 30 to 60 seconds.
Meantime, in Herndon, Virginia, Kamala Harris supporter Camila Alfonso Mesa goes house to house, trying to encourage people to vote for her candidate. They don't always open the door, but she keeps at it.
Hi, definitely Harris supporters.
She says that Harris replacing President Joe Biden in the presidential race was invigorating for young Democrats.
I have seen a big shift in energy and enthusiasm since the vice president became the nominee.
Alfonso Mesa thinks the Gen Z voting bloc of over 40 million young people could make a real difference in the presidential election. Laurel Bowman, VOA News.
Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump are locked in a tight race for the White House. Both candidates are working hard to win over the remaining undecided and independent voters. VOA's Paul Ndiho caught up with some early voters in Washington, D.C.
I worked for Roe versus Wade 50 years ago and helping to get that passed. So it's very disconcerting to see what's happened now. And people say, oh, it's up to the state. Well, what if you work? And what if you get transferred to another state with your job and that state doesn't support your values? What do? Do you say, oh, I can't take that job? Or it's a shame. I really hate to see what's happened to women's rights.
You can take a woman's right away to have an abortion and then offer nothing in the health care process. I myself find that my medications that are necessary for my health and to be here talking to you right now are affordable, and they weren't before. I'd had to take out loans to get my insulin. I can afford it out of my pocket now. So those are issues for me too. I have to concern myself for my neighbors, their health. I just think it's ridiculous to rip away things that should be not my decision.
Absolutely petrified at the thought that Kamala Harris would be president because I don't like her policies. I liked the way the country ran when he was in charge, not liking his personality. Absolutely, I don't like his personality, but I like his policies.
But I voted for Trump because I think Trump has the best ideas within helping the community and the United States and helping with tax cuts. And yeah, I don't know, I just really like Trump.
Early voters in the U.S. Capitol speaking with Africa 54's Paul Dihom. The U.S. presidential candidates are crisscrossing the country Tuesday as they attempt to persuade voters to cast ballots in their favor. Former President Donald Trump delivers a speech in the battleground state of Pennsylvania, while Vice President Kamala Harris prepares to deliver her campaign's closing argument on the Ellipse here in Washington, where she seeks to draw a contrast with Trump. VOA's Philip Alexiou joins us live from the venue. Hello, Philip. Do we know what she's likely to address first?
Yes, hi, Esther. Nice to be here. It's a beautiful day in Washington, D.C. We're on the Ellipse, and they call it the Ellipse because it's sort of a circular area in front of the White House. So behind me, and I'll get to the point that you asked just a second, I want to set the scene real quick. Behind me is the stage where Kamala Harris will be giving her rally speech at about 7 o'clock tonight. And if you look this way, that's when the sun is setting, so she's going to have very good lighting. I'm sure that's not by accident. And behind her is the White House. In front of me is the monument. This is the same place where former President Trump delivered his speech on the infamous January 6th. And thereafter, a lot of people marched down the Constitution Avenue and all the streets, Independence Avenue, and rioted at the Capitol. Now, as far as Kamala Harris is concerned and what she expects to talk about today, most likely much of what she has been talking about on her campaign trail, her short campaign trail, it's really sort of a touting her new way forward, creating an opportunity economy, as she says. She's talked a lot about tax breaks for families, child credit tax breaks. She's talked about helping people, first-time home buyers, getting houses, and she's also talked about a number of other things. Now, whether or not she'll talk much about the climate, we don't know. She has mentioned a lot about helping small businesses, funding small businesses, and making things easier for them. How much abortion or reproductive rights will come into play today? Kind of hard to say, but I would expect that it might come up. Mm-hmm. And inflation and the economy is really the big issue, or one of the biggest issues in the country today. So she's got a lot on her plate. She has a lot of things she wants to address, but those are the things that we would expect her to talk about.
Philip, I know it's a couple of hours before she addresses the crowd that is already beginning to gather there. There is tight security, we understand that, but what can she expect to achieve at this rally?
Well, it's interesting. You know, she's in a unique position because it was supposed to be President Biden, and he is not running again, and so she kind of came in the last second. But she was in the Biden administration, and she has supported the administration. So does she want to carry the administration ideas? She says she's different from Joe Biden, but when she was on television a few weeks back, she was asked that very question, what would you do differently? And she said she didn't think there would be much she would do different. So she's gotten a lot of pushback from the Trump campaign. Now, she's also got to distinguish herself from the former president. So she's sort of sandwiched between trying to make a case just for herself, as she's been trying to do, from President Biden, and then what's the difference between her and former President Trump. So she's got an interesting task ahead of her, and she's been manipulating a work. I shouldn't say manipulating, but crafting that as best she can in this short period of time.
And do we know what her next event is going to be like and where?
Yeah, it looks like she's going to end up going tomorrow. She's going to end up going to Madison, Wisconsin on Wednesday. That's tomorrow. And then Thursday, she's going to be heading to Reno and Las Vegas, Nevada. Now, as far as former President Trump, he was in Mar-a-Lago today and heading to Pennsylvania, if he isn't there already. But those are battleground states. Right. And then tomorrow he'll go to Green Bay, Wisconsin, and Thursday Henderson, Nevada, and then on Friday in Milwaukee. But so after this rally, and of course former President Trump had his rally on Sunday at Madison Square Garden in New York, after this closing argument, if you will, at this rally with the vice president, she is heading to the battleground states as well. So there's only 7 days, less than 7 days left if you count it by the hours, and it's a battleground all the way.
Right. Philip, thank you so much for your reporting. Philip Alexio, live for us from the Ellipse here in Washington. The U.S. presidential election is just 1 week away, and reporters from VOA's Africa Division's 10 language services spoke to people about what the expectations are after a new president is elected in a series titled Messages to the Next U.S. President. We hear from people across Africa about the expectations for U.S.-Africa relations, regional issues, and global challenges.
Africa has borne the brunt of climate change, and the biggest contributors of climate change have been the West, and specifically the US. And so I would expect reparations for food security and for health and other negative effects that climate change has brought on to Africa in the last few decades.
American leaders, they should continue where the previous American leaders did. And must continue to help Africa. Africa as a whole, not particularly in South Africa. Africa, the entire continent of Africa, because we as Africans, there's poverty. There are endless wars. So if they can intervene and end those wars, I think they'll be doing a huge favor for Africa.
The global economy revolves around the kind of policies and prism through which America views the world. Africa needs nurturing, and among the countries that commit efforts to growing Africa, not only in politics and economy, America also stands out.
Today, if America still wants to maintain its peaceful relations with African countries, it must adopt a foreign policy that can be adapted to African countries. This will enable African countries to achieve economic and social independence.
Pour permettre aux pays africains d'avoir leur indépendance.
It will be good if the U.S. president elected in November supports the economic and political developments of Africa, because there are things we have been noticing. There has been meddling in other countries, including ours. So I'll be happy if a president who doesn't meddle in the internal affairs of other countries and encourages Africans in their economic and political development is elected.
We believe that the future president must work to strengthen relations with various African countries, while at the same time bringing American policy in Africa back to the forefront. Given that there are other players appearing on the scene, including Russia, which has influence over 3 West African countries, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger.
They have
to use their leverage to ease the security problem in the Horn of Africa
as they have the capacity to do so. My message to the American investors is to enter into Ethiopia and Africa and invest in a way that can improve the quality of life for the people. U.S. companies should invest in Africa.
We have to consider that every human being deserves to live, and life is sacred. So for me, I don't feel comfortable seeing people dying from east, west, north, south, and that is life that would have been secured. You don't know what is within this life. So I believe that the leadership that is on board and those ones that are coming into leadership, you can look into this and ensure that every human being has their life respected. Yeah, we want peace, and we know that you have the power to enforce this.
What the world urgently needs from the next American leader is a reduction in wars. Since World War II and the Cold War, the world has experienced an unprecedented level of fear about the possibility of a war involving nuclear weapons. The United States has significant influence over whether these weapons are used. Countries want to stop being controlled by powerful nations. The incoming leader should not dictate to countries how they should live. This is something they must consider and determine if it is the right time to start advocating for coexistence without dominance.
Loving and caring for one another is the only thing that we have left. So for the next leaders, future leaders of America, and in terms of the relationship they have with other countries, I would only hope that whatever decision they take takes into consideration that the other country has citizens in it that are children of God, and any decision that should be taken or would be taken by those leaders take the other side into consideration.
People across Africa talking about the expectations for U.S.-Africa relations from the next U.S. president. Still to come, Zambia launches the use of an injectable HIV prevention drug. We'll be right back.
On the next Straight Talk Africa, the U.S. presidential election is on November 5th, and both candidates, Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump, are in a final campaign sprint to win the White House. The race is very close, with everyone watching 7 key battleground states that can sway the election to either side. Join me, Vincent McCory, for a discussion of the U.S. presidential election and how the outcome might affect the U.S.-Africa relations.
How are they going to relate with Africa now? Because Africa is, in the meanwhile, changing.
We've had 2 people who have been there before, and
yeah, you can take in more people from Africa to train them in leadership.
Opportunities, economic opportunity, educational opportunities.
A pivotal event that captures the world's attention.
In other news, Human Rights Watch say police in Mozambique have killed at least 11 people and injured more than 50 others in violence following a disputed presidential election on October 9th. Protests have rocked the Southern African nation since Daniel Chapo, candidate for the ruling Frelimo party that has held power since 1975, was announced winner of the voting. Guinea's military regime dissolved 53 political parties and placed 2 major opposition parties under observation late Monday, but the transitional government has yet to announce a date for elections. The West African country has been led by a military junta since soldiers ousted President Alpha Conde in 2021. ECOWAS is pushing for a return to civilian rule, and elections are scheduled for 2025. It's time for a health report, and joining us now is Africa 54 health correspondent Lino Mudu with the latest on the right to physical and mental well-being. Hello, Lino.
Hello, Esther. Hello, everyone. The UN Special Rapporteur on the Right to Health, Taleng Mokofang, says for millions of people worldwide, the enjoyment of the right to the highest attainable standard of physical and mental health remains unattainable. She says harm reduction strategies within universal health coverage models are key to ensuring that many groups who are discriminated against are not left behind.
Harm can present itself in numerous ways. Sometimes it stems from certain behaviors or substances. Other times it stems from not the behavior or the substance themselves, but rather from how states address them, or sometimes not. Harm reduction aligns with the right to health and the right to health framework of accessible, affordable, acceptable, and quality care, and many other related rights that get unlocked when you realize and promote the right to health. And in the context of universal health coverage, for example, in situations of vulnerability, including the climate crisis, conflict, health emergencies, we see harm reduction as a principle, as a paradigm, but as a roadmap to ensure that we truly leave no one behind. All of us continue to bear witness to the very practice of medicine that is being under attack. And so the right to health in the context of war, in the context of genocide, and protracted conflict, even in the areas such as Sudan and Congo, shows us that we cannot but move forward in the demand that human rights take center stage in how we analyze, understand, and want to solve the world's problems for sustainable peace and development.
Now, Zambia is the first country in Sub-Saharan Africa to offer an injectable HIV prevention drug outside of a study setting. For more insight, I spoke with Lakabi Kawanga, Director of Technical Services for the global healthcare nonprofit JSI for the USAID Discover project in Zambia.
Kabele, like you've said, is a long-acting drug, and it is cabotegravir, and it's given as an injectable. For prevention, we're giving it every 2 months. So Zambia was one of those countries which were privileged to also be supported by PEPFAR with a few doses so that we can roll it out in our country. And excitingly, we were the second country outside the research settings that were brave enough to just start this. And thanks to the Ministry of Health, with stakeholders and everyone that came on board so that this could be done. Oral PrEP has been fantastic. Since 2018, I think up to now, the Ministry was talking about 600,000 people have accessed oral PrEP before in the country. So meaning it was well received and a fantastic formula that we've been using. Then on top of that came Kabele. The major thing that I can say was we needed option. And the major thing again to look at when you're looking at Kabele and oral PrEP, Kabele came more or less to look at what could have been the barriers with oral PrEP that it could work on. So that's how it came, and it's injectable, you receive it once, while it's oral PrEP you take every day. But Kabele comes with this aspect where it can work on that stigma aspect. If you want to keep it to yourself, you can keep it to yourself. You receive an injection and you're quiet. All that you do, you go back to receive another injection after 2 months.
So it sounds like it's a very good option. I mean, when you talk about alternative, I'm sure a lot of people will want one injection every 2 months instead of a pill every day. Tell us more about some of the challenges, actually, because rolling out something new is not easy.
I'll get from what the ministry said is when it comes to testing, for HIV testing, what we realized was with Kabele, you don't only need the rapid tests that talk about only identification of antibodies, or what we call the serological testing. It requires also somebody to do a nucleic acid testing, which goes for the DNA. So that comes with another cost. And Kabele, as of now, since it's still new, requires that we do a number of tests to make sure that our clients are safe. You know, safety comes first before anything. So because of that, it also comes with an additional cost. We need to work on our network and just increase the capacity of our PCR testing almost everywhere, because we just have a few points where we do that in a district or in a province.
How has the introduction of Kabele changed the landscape of HIV prevention in Zambia and reach populations that were hesitant, for example?
When Kabele was introduced, for us as JSI, I think we supported about 4 sites with 2 outreach sites in about 2 districts. So as of now, we haven't very much gone extensively, but quite a number of people have received it. Under the facilities that we support, we have about 1,218, which is a good number in the few 6-7 months that we've done. So what I've seen as a change in the landscape, in the facilities of the catchment populations that we support, there's been that excitement of a new formula. Because that 1,218 during this period is about more or less, is it 50% or 60% of the people accessing PrEP? So meaning the population or the communities itself is excited and the acceptance is high because the way they're receiving Kabele is competitive to oral PrEP. One other thing which we've come to discover is with oral PrEP, it requires you to come back, what we say continuity in use of a certain formula. So last time when we were doing oral PrEP only, when you do an analysis of continuity in use, when it was oral PrEP only, it used to be at 1 month, a little bit like, what I can say, more or less like at 65%. But after introduction of Kabele, we've seen everything has gone up. Continuity in use now is standing at 86% when it comes to at 1 month assessment, which is very good. And when you tease out Kabele on its own, continuity in use of the formula at 1 month is going as high as 97%, which is excellent. So meaning people who are still at risk, remember it's PrEP, you can fall off when you're not at risk. So meaning people who are still at risk are able to come back and get their 2nd dose. They're able to come back and get their 3rd dose. And not only that, I was just talking of 1 month. When you go to 3 months, because after 1 month, they'll come after 3 months now, after 2 months, which makes it 3 months, we did an assessment. It was about 89%, which is very good compared to the time we're just using oral PrEP.
That's our health report for today. To stay in touch, find me on X at Lino Mudu. Back to you, Esther.
Thanks, Lino. Be sure to watch Lino Mudu's health reports every Tuesday on Africa 54, and that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching. I need my help.